Thank you, Dave. Let's. I'm going to ask some ushers to come now. Terry and Steve and Dwayne, and if you would come, Pam, you two, and whoever Terry's talked to. I don't need to organize this. I think we're good. Come on down. We're going to take an offering, And listen, this is not our regular offering. That's in the back. But this, if you would just like support Gideon's, that's fine. So you can go ahead and take the offering. Some of you are familiar with a name called Joe Rogan. If you're over a certain age, you might not be. Joe Rogan is host, I think, the most watched media, regular scheduled media thing that's going right now. About a month ago, I saw him interview an atheist who started a project. The project was he's a well-known atheist skeptic. And his target, he was going to prove how ridiculously superstitious Christianity is. And he was doing an interview with this man who I think started with the Gospel of Luke. This man is now a touring Christian speaker from that. It's the first time he'd ever interacted with the Bible. And so I think God's Word is active and still makes a difference. And so what we're doing is we have just little New Testaments out there. And if we run out, I'll get some more. Challenge you just to take one with you, have it with you. And if you run across someone and the door opens of the conversation where they say, I'm not familiar, you can just share it with them. Say, this is just a New Testament. You can keep it. We'll come back. We'll keep that supplied back there. But it's out in the entryway, little gray New Testament. So please feel free to take one. I think I need to tell you about my premise today. We're in this series called Practicing the Resurrection. And that is this. I love good doctrine. I love good theology, probably more than most people. It makes me excited. But really the thing that will make the biggest difference in the faith is who we are as people and how we interact with others. We are better in relationship than we are alone. In fact, there are very few problems in life that isolation will not make worse, even if our first inclination is to just kind of cocoon. And our relationships are important, and our important relationships are vital. And I think our relationships are supposed to be life-giving and life-affirming. We are told something continuously in our culture, and I'm not sure it's sound advice. In fact, I think it's bad advice. Are you ready? Here's what it is. We hear this a lot. Marriage is hard work. It's hard, and it's work. And you work, and you work, and it's hard, and it's work. Well, why don't you want to get married? We wonder why people are reluctant. Relationships like parenting, like being friends, and especially marriage, are long-term commitments with very imperfect people. So there are challenges. But good relationships, good marriages make life better, not worse. They make life more enjoyable and less work. Because there are parts of life that the burdens are lifted and shared with others. We don't hear that enough. I saw again just this week that there's been more than a 30-point drop in the last 20 years on people who say that having children is important for them. It is hard for some people to conceive, but life does not always look like it does when we are 25 or 30. Oh, I want to travel, I want to do this, I want to do that. Kids just get in the way. And then when you get to be my age, I hate saying that now, but life begins to open up when there are the next generation and the generation after. There's concerts and games, and you can experience life again through their smiles and their joys, and things open up. We see life through the eyes of grandchildren, grandnieces, grandnephews. If not for that, sometimes we would still be home, Michelle and I, just looking at each other week after week after week, which would be awful for Michelle. And our relationships are supposed to bring life. In Ephesians chapter 5 is one of the more famous passages of Scripture. It's called the household code, and I think most people really don't understand this at all. We have bad ideas. We all get to that point in chapter 5, verse 21, where it says, verse 22, wives submit to your husbands, and our culture gets all upset. I'm not even going to go through that part of it, because I really don't think we understand. If you want to understand, sometime on Google this week, look up household codes or ancient Greek household codes. You can read lots of them and compare them to what we have in Ephesians, and then talk to me again about who's actually revolutionary and who's affirming and who's loving and who's not. What I'm going to do this morning, I'm going to ask you to stand as we read this passage of Scripture in honor of God's Word. But I'm not going to start at the beginning. I'm going to go clear toward the end of that passage, starting with Ephesians 5, verse 28 through 33. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. And for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery. But I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. There's just a couple things here, some words that jump out at me at a time like this. And I think at a time again where we need to culturally hear some things that I think we used to know. And I know that all of you are experts and you will be bored to death, but for no one else, this is for me. The first thing we find in verse 31 about especially the marriage relationship, it said, for this reason, a husband will leave his mother and father and be united to his wife. Listen, I'm on this journey like everyone else, and I am learning the direction. And it's not the same way our culture is heading. We hear important voices in the culture now that say things like this: you have to preserve yourself at all costs. In fact, you can't love, you must learn to love yourself first. Love turned inward is never love. You have to possess your own money. You have to have your own finances. You have to have your own name. You don't allow any little shred of your individual self to get lost. And I think I know what some of that means. And I think I know what some of that is aimed at. But we are not meant to be isolated from each other. We're not meant to be, I'm just here and hopefully I'll help her, I'll help my wife, only to the point where I don't lose myself, whatever that means. There's nothing that says losing yourself more than wandering through a flea market somewhere. Sorry, I'm just throwing that in. But we're a new unit. The two shall become one. We're to be united in life. We're to be united in direction. We're to be united in service. We're to be united in every way possible. And some of you know what I mean. After a while, you can't even envision yourself apart from others around you. In fact, I hear a lot of people that say, I'm going on a journey of self-discovery. I'm going to go sit on a mountain somewhere to try to find me. I'm convinced there is no me that exists in isolation from the very important people around me. There's certainly no me apart from Michelle. There's no me apart from Adam and Sarah. There's even no me apart from you. We used to know more than we do now, back in a time with much more wisdom than today, which isn't a high bar at all. We used to celebrate things in communities. We celebrated weddings differently. We celebrated the creation of a new home. We celebrated the creation of a new family. We celebrated the beginning of a new thing, not a continuation of two isolated things that happen to be living in the same house. We celebrated the creation of a new thing. It was a holy event. We've now replaced it with a party event. There was a show on, I haven't seen it, and thank goodness I've never ever watched it. But I think the whole purpose of the show is they would have these four people get together, they would go through their marriages and their weddings and all the things and the reception, all the things they did. At the end, they voted for who had the best wedding. That is everything I hate wrapped up in one show. Talk to me 25, 35, 45 years down the road, I'll tell you who had the best wedding. Let me see how many lives were touched. Let me see how much love and sacrifice and service and devotion went on. I'll tell you who had the best wedding. Let me be the first to call for a renewal. If you are ever the best man or the maid of honor in a wedding, do me this one favor. I'm trying to start some new momentum to sweep over the culture. Let it start right here today. And that is this. If you're ever the best man or the maid of honor and it's time to give your speech at the reception, promise me, don't tell any inside jokes. Or what you said in your dorm room or behind the scenes. If the only people that get it are in the wedding party, keep it to yourself. Instead, engage the entire community. The grandmother, the aunts, the people across the street. If you are the couple, if you're the wedding couple, don't just use the time to party with friends, but engage every person of the community who came to your wedding. Because it's a community event. When we go, we came to celebrate you, not hear September played too loud. That's an Earth, Wind, and Fire reference to those of you who might be a little too old or too young to engage with this in either way. And it's played at every wedding, so if you've heard it, you might not be aware of the title. The beauty of a marriage is never the two lives going on as before, but this new one that is being formed. Not only is it new, but it not only you need to be united, but it must be nurtured. It says in right there, the part of the verse that we read, it said, after all, no one hates his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church. Every relationship in life, but especially the important ones like parenting, and marriage must be nurtured. And see, the thing is, when you're dating, it's never work. That's not when it's work. That's when you can't wait. You can't wait to see him. Where's he going to be? If I know where he's going to be, I'll try to be there too. And now you wake up in the morning, him again. Now there are bills and deadlines, and I understand that life is more complicated, so there may not be the time there was when you were dating. I agree with all of that stuff. But for the important relationships of your life, not only marriage, but family, everything else, carve out a little time anyway. Kids have this annoying, I don't even think it's a habit. They're not even aware you're doing it. Because you go, oh, I know what my kid loves. They love milkshakes and this, and we're going to go get a milkshake, and then we're going to talk. We're going to sit, and I'm going to talk. I've created time with my child, and we're going to talk. It's going to be this wonderful time I've carved out, and we sit down and have a milkshake. What's going on? Anything new? No. How's school? Fine. Anything bothering you? No. Want to talk about anything? No, not really. Wow, wasn't that wonderful for everybody? And then when you're right in the middle of a project, you're doing your taxes, you're in the hood of the car, you're doing something, then all of a sudden they come around and they have like 20 questions for you, want to start this terribly timed conversation. Your kids determine when you carve out the time, not you. If it's going to happen at all. The problem is, Brandon said this 2 weeks ago. We all want to be wonderful parents, but we don't get to choose our kids. And the kids we get are not the ones we would have chosen probably at the beginning of the whole process. And the problem is, once we get that first kid figured out, okay, I got it. Whew, I'm good. Then the second one comes. And they're completely different. It's like a game. And no one tells you the rules. Each season of life as a parent, each season of life as a husband, as a wife, we have to choose to love. We forget about that. We kind of, as culturally, I promise to love you until you have a really bad month. And then it's up for grabs. Instead of choosing, I'm choosing to love you regardless of what comes. The thing that you can do together is always better than the thing that you do alone. When I think of certain things, usually someone in my family pops to mind. If you say, have a memory of your son, certain places come to mind. When you ask me tell me about your daughter, this is the picture that first pops into mind. She worked up in South Dakota at a ranch and took guests on a trail ride. And we went up in one summer when she was up there, and the person from the ranch took the guests on the trail ride, but the person, our guide, was our daughter. And this is a picture from that trail ride. Every beautiful hike in the mountains that I have ever done in my life, and I've done a number of beautiful hikes in the mountains, Michelle was with me. So I can't think of that without thinking about her. Oh, my mom and stepdad took us to the mountains, and we got the great tour of Great Smoky Mountain National Park, everything you can see from the car. See, your legacy in life, your greatest legacy will never be crafted alone. It will be crafted through the important people and the people that you go through life with. Legacies are created with others, the best ones. The thing is, though, each path might be a little different depending on who it is. Verse 33, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Let me talk just briefly about marriages a little bit. I've now been married, I'm going on 37 here pretty quick. I think I'm starting to figure out a few things. Just a couple. And I think that one of the things that, if you ask me, it's very important. And it's interesting that Paul settled on this language. I think it's very important for us men to love our wives. And when we say that, I think they want and need and appreciate our attention. Attention. See, we do some things, and I know what we do. Or what we're reading the magazine or we're reading the book, and our wife comes in and says something, and they say, "You're not listening to us." "Yes, I'm listening to you. You said go to the store, buy a banana, get this, get this." See, we're quoting it back as we're looking at the page, and we go, "What? I'm listening." And the wife goes, "No, you weren't." Because they didn't have our attention. We need time. Things to do together. We have to value that. I think wives crave affection. Hold her hand. Give her a hug. Sit next to her. When her feet are freezing cold, allow her to stick her feet to warm them up. The things that a woman cherishes are probably not your first thought. Husbands, do it anyway. This is a phrase I'll bring back in just a little bit later, so remember that last phrase. I'm telling you now so you won't charge me with being unfair. I think the biggest danger in our relationships as husbands is indifference. We have to be present. We have to be there for time and attention and center in on the person. And I think Paul gets it right. I think what men often really enjoy and crave from their wife is respect and appreciation. I've said this before, and I think it's right. I'm not the first one. I'm not even one of the only ones. Newly married, there might be some task, building a cabinet, I don't know, painting something, doing something around the house, and the husband says, "I'm going to do it." And the first time he does it, it's not that good. There's something that's not right. It's a little messed up. So sometimes there's a choice. The choice is, do you want it right by tomorrow night? Or do you want to instill a love for him to continue doing that? If you point out every mistake and tell it how bad it is, you might get it right for tomorrow. But that'll be the last time he probably does it. And let me suggest that that's probably not a win. A hug and appreciation and "isn't this great?" You might have to live looking at that ugly cabinet for the next 2 years. But the next one will be a lot better. And it'll be a lifetime of the new task. I think husbands need admiration and just visible sign that you appreciate and love them. And I think husbands need affection too. Probably not hand-holding or the unexpected hug. Affection might mean something a little different for him. Don't make me draw you a picture. And that kind of affection that is meaningful to your husband, like the other way, may not be your first thought. Might be a good idea to do it anyway. Moving on. The biggest danger, I think, when it comes in the home, husbands, I think biggest danger is especially emotional indifference and distance and not being present. I think sometimes the biggest danger for women is, even if you got to look at the ugly cabinet, is the danger of contempt. Rolling your eyes, the harumph. It's probably best that not be done. I heard someone tell a story. I was sharing it with Wade last week because it was fresh in my mind. And it was a couple that was getting married, and they said they went to this older gentleman in, I can't remember if it was the church or just someone they knew. And they said, we're just getting married. We're just weeks away. Can you give us any advice? And he goes, well, I only have one thing. And he looked at the woman and he said, pretend you've been married for 2 years. It's 2 years down the road, and you and your husband have a terrible argument. Who are the first 3 people that you're calling? Well, my sister, she's going through a divorce right now. I have a friend who's not dating anybody, and I have this other friend. And he goes, good. When you call them, will they support you unquestionably? She goes, yes, absolutely. And he says, that's the wrong 3 people. And he looked at the husband and said, who are the first 3 people you're going to call? Are they going to take your side? Are they going to support you? Then those are the wrong 3 people. The 3 people that you call need to be people whose first impulse will be to defend your spouse and question you on your first response. That's the way it is with everything. One of the most powerful things I think that we can ever say as parents is we're not going to get everything right. And when we don't get everything right, that we model behavior and go to our child and say, I'm sorry, I messed that up. Here's what I should have done. Again, if the goal is to get a change of behavior 10 minutes from now, I'm not sure that might be the way to go. If you want to be a person of influence and legacy, I think that is the way you want to go. Verse 32 says this. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ in the church. Every relationship you have, and we need relationships, but they're not ends unto themselves. And while they do help you through life and they will be wonderful things for you to have, that's not the goal either. We are not meant to get lost in our own little world, even if we have 8 wonderful people in our own little world. Our homes, our marriages, our relationships are supposed to show the world the love that Christ has for His church. And sometimes when things aren't going the best, that's when we demonstrate that the best. His undeserving, grace-needing, constantly making mistakes church. And yet Christ offers grace and peace to us. One other last thing. As you think about your relationships and you think about your home and you think about your marriages and everything else, let me ask a question. They serve a larger purpose. What is your mission? Your marriage, your home, your parenting relationships should have a mission to it. Who are you touching? Whose lives are you changing? What is your mission? Why do you exist? Why does your home exist? I was thinking that this week. This is the week on Monday we put our mom in hospice. So I don't know what's if this is weeks or months or exactly how long this is going to be. And I'm thinking back to what I'm sure felt very, very chaotic to my mother as a single mom who would get up and make breakfast and then get the kids off to school, and she'd go to work, and then she'd come home from work, and she'd make dinner and clean up dinner, and then she would straighten up around the house, get us ready for bed, go to bed, rinse, repeat, the same thing every day. That's all life was. There was no fun, off doing her thing. She was a single mom doing that kind of stuff. And occasionally we had friends that would come over. One of my friends was Sherman. Sherman's mom was a drug addict. I think everybody knew it. Sherman had nothing. Sherman come to my house. I was excited to have someone come over. I taught Sherman how to play Stratego and chess. And that's what we did. Wow, that sounds like you were a nerd. Yeah, maybe a little bit. Sherman and I met about 6 years ago for lunch. I was driving through Columbus, Ohio, and we met. And Sherman has 2 brothers. Both his brothers have been in prison most of their lives. And Sherman said to me, he said, "How's your mother?" And I said, "She's fine." He said, "Would you tell her thank you?" And he said, "Your home was my refuge. That's why I was over all the time. I was just happy to have a kid to play chess with." We do not know the legacy and impact we leave. Your home should have a mission around it. That's why relationships are important. They will know that we are Christians, not by our flawless doctrine that we can espouse. And I like flawless doctrine. But because of the love we have for one another. And that's got to start in our foundational relationships.